Hey everyone, it's Stephanie and happy midsummer. I know that we are a few weeks actually past like true midsummer, but that is not stopping me from celebrating in style by bringing you a curated collection inspired by the Ari Aster masterpiece, Midsummer. So, as soon as I started doing these curated collections, I really knew that I wanted to do a collection themed around midsummer, and as soon as I started releasing these videos, people have been asking me to cover Midsummer. So I knew it had to happen. I wanted to do a Pride movie for June, but this month we are covering Midsummer. And I am so excited to show you all the polishes that I have picked to represent moments and visuals in this movie. It is such an incredible, horrifying, beautiful movie, and I am so excited to share that with you. Anyway, let's get started. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Midsummer. So, Midsummer follows our protagonist, Danny. No, not that one. This is Danny, played by Florence Pugh, who is currently not living her best life. Her sister has bipolar and is extremely unstable, and her boyfriend, Christian, seems to have one foot outside the door in regards to their relationship and also seemingly like everything else in his life. After a family tragedy, she accompanies her boyfriend and his three friends, Josh, Mark, and Pelle, to Pelle's hometown in Sweden to observe their midsummer festival. It's clear when they get there that the vibes are a little culty, to say the least, but with the help of a never ending supply of hallucinogenic drugs, the group settles in for their time on the commune. Things become tense after the two oldest members of the community ritually unalive themselves in a ceremony called an Atastupa, which is a real ancient ceremony, by the way. There's a lot of stuff like that in this movie. And slowly, the outsiders who have been brought to the commune begin to disappear one by one until only Danny and Christian are left. Now, this movie is 2.5 hours and it's packed to the brim with plot and subtext and themes. And I'm here to say that today I am hardly going to scratch the surface of this movie and its characters and plots and all that other stuff. I have watched this movie 2 or 3 times, and I don't think that I've even fully scratched the surface of this film. It is just so rich and deep with lore. But I am really excited to share with you my choices in these polishes and share with you my thoughts and opinions about this piece. So let's begin. So the first polish I've chosen for this collection is a little bit of an odd one out, but what I've chosen it for is also kind of like an odd part of this film. My first polish is Cadillacquer Let It Glow, or as I would call it, Two Moons. So Let It Glow is a beautiful, like green to gold to brown multi-chrome polish that is just full of these light blue hex glitters, multi sizes. Cadillacquer loves using these hex glitters in their polishes, and I love when Cadillacquer uses them. I feel like they add this sort of organic element to their polishes. I say this all the time about Cadillacquer polishes. They have a great way of making this inorganic hex shape pattern. Well, I guess it's kind of organic because like bees use hex shapes, but anyway, the point is not particularly organic hexagonal shape, and just kind of making it into this perfect little like spotted effect in their polishes. I really love that. Anyway, this choice is inspired by about the first 30 minutes of this movie. So the first 30 minutes of this movie are absolutely the hardest part of this movie for me and pretty much everybody who I've talked to about it, like all of us to watch. By the way, I'm also wearing this polish, just in case you didn't know. So in this part, our protagonist Danny has been getting a lot of emails and phone calls from her sister, who, as I said before, is bipolar and very unstable. And suddenly everything just goes silent, and she is really worried about her family. And a little bit later, she finds out that her sister has offed herself and her parents all off in one go, and it is absolutely devastating, especially being somebody who suffers from mental health issues. This part of this movie is like, I literally can't even, I almost turned this movie off the first time I watched it because of this part, which is like one of the least gory, disturbing parts in the movie. But man, it is so incredibly powerful. I am not going to linger on this part very long, but Danny is basically left with nothing. She lives in her apartment. Her boyfriend comes and visits, but like I said, he kind of has one foot outside the door. So when she needs comforting from him, he's not really there to fully be present, fully hold her in this situation, as they say in this movie. And she is really experiencing a dark night of the soul at this point. And that is partially represented by a painting that's next to her in the scene where her and Christian are sitting on the couch and she's crying. And it's this painting with two moons. And I think I heard this on a Ryan Hollinger video, but he relates the two moons as something like the moon replacing the sun in her life, giving her this never ending night, this endless night, no sun, no happiness. Her life feels basically over. It's an absolutely gut wrenching part of the film. And I chose this polish because it really encompasses like the exact colors and kind of look of that painting that's next to her. Like when I started curating this collection, I immediately thought that I wanted something to represent the two moons, and like immediately I thought of Let It Glow. And actually, funny story, when I thought about this, my husband and I were driving somewhere and I was the one driving. And I turned to him and I was like, I have an idea. I need you to send me a text message because like I can't write things down because I'm driving. I was like, just send me a text message that says two moons, let it glow. And he was like, what is this weird cryptic writing you want me to send you? So he like sent me this like text message that made it like seem even creepier. But yeah, I think that this is such a beautiful polish, and I feel like it has this enigmatic look about it. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but this just fit the bill so well for me. It matches the color of the painting and the feel of the scene. So I think it's a perfect choice for this, but very different from everything else that we have coming up. But yeah, this is Cadillacquer's Let It Glow, or as I would call it, Two Moons. So later on, Danny and Christian decide to go to a party, and at that party, it's revealed that Christian is planning on going to Sweden in just a few weeks with a few of his friends, and he has not told Danny, even though he has tickets and it's all planned and everything. And Christian has what seems to be kind of a problem with avoidance in his life. And to avoid having a fight with Danny, he decides to invite her to Sweden, something he has not run past any of his friends. And two of them are not happy about, but one of them seems like kind of oddly chill about this. And that brings us to our next polish. This is Emily Damali, Waiting for the Sun, or as I would call it, Pelle. So Pelle, I think that's how you pronounce his name. They call him Pelle a lot in the movie, but I do think that there is like an extra accent. But if you speak Swedish, if you know how to say this name, please let me know in the comments. And if I am butchering it, then just like I'm sorry, I'm doing my best. Forgive me. I love Pelle. Anyway, Pele is responsible for this trip. He is the one who is from this small remote town in Sweden. And when he finds out that Danny is coming, at first he seems a little bit uncertain, but pretty much as soon as Danny like enters the actual scene, he seems elated. So he talks to her about it, explain what happens, shows her pictures of things like past May Queens and his sisters and all these people who live in his village. And he also has a serious heart to heart with her about her recent loss of her family, telling her that he also lost his family. He lost his parents at a young age in a fire. Now, this is a polish that I knew I wanted in this collection as soon as I started curating it. And I actually think I bought it for this collection. I've wanted it forever, but I finally went out and actually bit the bullet and bought this one. And this polish, I forgot to describe it. It's this beautiful topper full of these curly golden strands of holographic gold glitter. And there's a little bit of hollow just scattered throughout for a little bit of extra glitter and glitz. Now, I could have called this one Danny because Danny has the yellowest hair of the group in the movie. And she also is, you know, kind of our queen, so I think it would work for her. But the shapes of these glitters really made me think of Pelle's hair. And also to me and to, I think, the entire community in the movie, Pelle is the golden boy. And I have to say, I love Pelle so dang much. Like, seriously, legitimately, I love Pelle. And what can I say? I just love, like, tall, curly haired men with beards from horror movies who never did anything wrong ever in their life. Sue me. All right, so Danny, Christian, Pelle, and the crew all make their way to Sweden. And as soon as they're in kind of spitting distance of Pelle's hometown, They meet up with a bunch of other travelers coming back or just hanging around the area, and they are given some psychedelics and immediately kind of start tripping out about the fact that it's kind of late and the sun is not going down, which they are in a very northern area of the world, in a northern area of Sweden. And just kind of like 30 days of night, this is a bit like 30 days of sun. They're in the time of year where the sun never really goes down. It gets dark for like a little bit, but not entirely and not for a very long time. So this leads us to our next polish, which is Orly Rinse and Repeat, or as I would call it, Midnight Sun. So Rinse and Repeat is this beautiful mid-tone blue, very reminiscent of Sally Hansen's Pacific Blue. I should compare them side by side to see which one's brighter because I do have an OG Pacific Blue. But yeah, I knew I wanted to have a nice light blue in this collection. Actually, if I were to make a midsummer collection as a nail polish creator myself, I would almost certainly want to make it just completely a nail art set with a bunch of creams and a bunch of toppers because folk art is such an important part of this film. And I think that just a lot of midsummer inspired nail art could be just so beautiful just to see all over someone's Instagram grid. So that's what I would do. And I wanted to include a few polishes that I thought were like complete looks in themselves, but also include a few that I would make if I was making this its own little collection that I made for nail art. But yeah, so this is a beautiful blue, and I'm so glad that I rewatched this movie because of what Pelle says about it being bright and late at night. He says it's the midnight sun, and so that's what inspired the name of this. And the midnight sun is such a character in this movie. Like I said, this is kind of like a 30 days of night thing where it never fully changes the time of day. And I think it takes a while of watching the movie before you really realize how much you don't know what day it is, what time of day it is, how long they've been there. You see them go to sleep a few times, but it makes me curious if they even really know what time it is, if they're sleeping correctly. There is something so magical to me in a movie where they can take something that feels safe, like daylight versus darkness, and make it part of the horror. And they absolutely do that with the midnight sun in Midsummer. So this is Orly Rinse and Repeat, or as I would call it, Midnight Sun. So finally, Pele brings the group into the inner sanctum, so to speak, of his hometown, the central town living area, and introduces everybody to his family, which in this case is like literally everybody, because in this commune, babies are raised communally. They know who the parents are, but if you are raised around the same time, that's considered your brother or your sister. And basically everybody's your parent, everybody's your grandparent, everybody's your sibling, everybody's your child. This is just one big family. So they look around, see all these beautiful buildings and tapestries and everything, and off in the distance there is a big yellow pyramid. Someone asks what's up with that yellow building, which leads us to our next polish. This is Orly Claim to Fame, or as I would call it, it's like a sacred temple. So yeah, basically somebody asks, I think it was Pele, what that building is, and he says it's like a sacred temple that no one's allowed in. And I really love how they say things in this movie. Like they'll say like the most sus things in this movie, and they'll say them like so incredibly like matter of factly. They'll lie and then take back their lie and say they meant something else without like skipping a beat. And I swear, it's like for me, like I start believing it. You start believing it. You're like, no, he didn't really mean that. They don't mean that. They're fine. They're nice. These are nice people. And yeah, a lot of people do like the people in this movie. I told you, I like Pele. I think he's great. Anyway, this is another choice that I made basically immediately when I started to curate this collection. I knew we needed a yellow for the big yellow building, which by the way, I'm wearing on my shirt. I actually bought this for my yellows video. This is the same outfit I wore for my yellows video. You cannot see it, but yeah, spoiler alert, things on this shirt are things. But yeah, I knew I would need a yellow to represent this barn. And also there's so many yellow things in the movie. The sun is a very central part of this movie, as we have talked about with the blue that we just had, the midnight sun. So blue and yellow are everywhere in this piece. Again, if I was making my own collection that I was releasing with my own nail polish brand, I would have like an entire set of just like different colors that you see in the movie. There, of course, would be a red, there would be a green, there would be a brown, all of those different colors. But I wanted to make this video a little bit more digestible, so I decided not to get into all of those today. But yes, this is Orly Claim to Fame, or as I would call it, it's like a sacred temple. All right, up next is by Danny Viana Picasso Moth, or as I would call it, Ruby Radr. And no, not Ruby Rod. I said this to my husband and he immediately was like, Chris Tucker? No. Although, should I make a Fifth Element collection? Because I kind of think that I should. So Picasso Moth is a gorgeous, gorgeous white Crelly. I think, did I leave this out of my whites video? I think I might have, but I should have put it in there because this is so incredibly amazing. It has these yellow hex glitters. It has these red, like matte or metallic, I'm not sure, but they're red flakies, black bar glitter, iridescent flakies, and just a mild blue shimmer running throughout. This is such an incredible polish for its original inspiration, but it also reminded me of the Rubi Radr, which is the sacred text for the Harga people. The Harga people are the people of this town. So there is a character, one of Christian's friends, named Josh, and he's played by William Fitzgerald Harper, who you may know as Chidi from The Good Place. But imagine if Chidi like got into anthropology instead of ethics and his entire personality kind of shift away from ethics. This is like a more calm, less ethically worried and also less ethical Chidi from The Good Place. They're very similar characters. They're both very studious and well spoken, and I just think that William Fitzgerald Harper was like made to play this role. Like, yes, he was typecast, but this is his type and they should cast him as this. Anyway, so he is doing his sociology dissertation on different midsummer festivals celebrated throughout Europe. And of course, being on this commune and experiencing this very unique festival, he is absolutely fascinated with the Harga people. He wants to learn as much as he can. So, of course, Christian, who is the number one douchebag of this movie, has been talking about not knowing what he wants his dissertation to be for like the entire beginning of the movie, and he decides that he wants to do his on the Harga people, which Josh takes as kind of like a personal insult and kind of like a violation of the bro code, which Christian also agrees because the way that he like tells him about it, you could tell he's like, yeah, you know that you shouldn't be doing this. You know this is wrong. You know this is a dick move. But he does it anyway, and so that kind of like starts a little rivalry. They both get permission to do their dissertations on this, given that they don't name any names of the people and they don't actually take pictures of the people in the village. And one thing that Josh gets access to that Christian doesn't are these sacred texts of the Harga people, the Rubi Radr. So he is shown the Rubi Radr by one of the village elders, and the Rubi Radr is basically a collection of paintings done by Reuben, who is an oracle and who is unclouded by normal thought. So Reuben, as the elder tells Josh, is a product of inbreeding, as were all the oracles that came before him. They write down their thoughts or just paintings into these books, and then they are interpreted by the village elders. And I thought that this polish just really encompassed kind of like the look of the Rubi Radr. You don't see it very clearly except for the runic writing that the village elders have put in there. But you do see just kind of from an angle the stuff that Reuben's written in there. And I thought that this polish really captured that vibe. So this is by Danny Viana Picasso Moth, or as I would call it, Rubi Radr. So Josh does get access to the Rubi Radr, but he is told very strictly, in no uncertain terms, he is not allowed to take pictures of it. But Josh, for some reason, decides to go against the wishes of the people who have so graciously allowed them into their culture, and he sneaks in to the room with the Rubi Radr in what I think is the middle of the night. It is a tiny bit dark outside during this scene, and he tries to take a picture, and it does not go well for him. And at this point of the movie, it's not going well for a lot of people. So at this point in the movie, Mark has gone missing. Now, I haven't talked about Mark a lot. His big character trait is that he is annoying, and stupid, and he does stuff like pee on the ancestral tree and doesn't understand or apologize when people get mad about it. We don't know exactly what's happened to him, but we have reason to believe it was not something nice. We know that Josh has been unalived, and there are two other visitors who a different person brought in besides Pele, who were not so happy about the Adastupa in the beginning of this piece, and they asked to go home, and we are told they have gone home. So that just leaves us with Danny and Christian. So Danny has been noticing troubling things the entire time she's been here. And whenever she does, she brings them up to Christian. And Christian is completely dismissive. Like, he says the right things in the beginning when she brings them up, like, oh, that's so sad, or that's so bad, or whatever, don't worry. And then he is right back to doing his dissertation or whatever else he wants to do. So while Christian is basically completely ignoring her, the women of the village invite Danny to spend time with them. So she cooks with them. They give her a dress, they give her a flower crown, and they even invite her to participate in their dance competition that will choose the May Queen. So they all dance around the maypole. It is such a cool scene. I love this scene so much because, like, she kind of makes a friend. I don't know the friend's name, unfortunately, and they drink some tea together for stamina. Tea, if you've seen this movie, if you know what happens in this movie, there's a lot of tea that is drinking in this movie made with a certain fungus. So she gets this tea and she dances around the maypole, and the last person standing gets to be May Queen. And it is just such an amazing, cool, like, vibrant, joyous scene of all these women dancing. It is so much fun. It makes me want to dance around a maypole, but I know I would literally just break my ankle, but someday, maybe someday. But yes, so the last woman standing will be crowned the May Queen, which leads us to our next polished pick, which is Orly Turn It Up, or as I would call it, May Queen. So this is inspired by the headdress, well, multiple headdresses, and a full dress that Danny wears later in the movie when, as you guessed it, she is crowned May Queen. She outlasts everybody in the May Queen dance and she wins. And, you know, I've thought a lot about if they staged it, if they made it so Danny would win May Queen to endear themselves to her. And the more I watch that scene, the more I think Danny did that on her own, because I think it would have been really, really hard to stage it and, like, be sure that Danny wins, because, like, towards the end they are extremely tired. They are really, really wearing out. People are falling down left and right. They're running into each other. They're tripping. So, like, I think Danny gets May Queen all on her own. And honestly, you go, girl. I am so happy for you. This is another polish that was really on my mind when I first started curating this collection, because I feel like it has all of the colors of Danny's flower crown and her dress and the chair she sits in a little bit later when she sits at the head of the table at the May Queen feast. It is just such beautiful imagery. When you look at Midsummer, you see Danny in this outfit. You can't not see Danny in this outfit. And of course, it kind of gives an impression of the movie that, you know, is and isn't the movie. This movie is just so ripe with, like, juxtaposition, really horrific things happening while people are being really happy. I love that about this movie. Like, I don't like it when a horror movie is too dark and too bleak. I could go on forever about this sort of thing. I think you could do some great nail art for the May Queen using this topper. This is Orly Turn It Up, or as I would call it, May Queen. All right, last but not least, we're going to talk about the very end of this movie. So for the last polish, I chose Garden Path Lacquer's Someday You'll Join Us, or as I would call it, A Little Love Story. So A Little Love Story is a beautiful, multi-chrome, flaky, polish topper. I pretty much strictly use this as a full coverage nail polish because something about it just doesn't really look good as a topper. I did get a picture of it over the polish I'm calling It's Like a Sacred Temple, and I just don't think it ever looks that good as a topper. But in 2 to 3 coats, this absolutely is full coverage, and I chose it for 2 reasons. One reason, it has a very bright red orange shift to it, which makes me think of the hair of both Christian and this other character I'm going to talk about in a moment named Maya. And also it is red like fire, which we will get into a little bit later. So while Danny has been becoming part of this community, Christian has also, in his way, been becoming part of this community. There has been a woman, a young woman, an 18-year-old woman, who has been eyeing him ever since he got there, and her name is Maya. Of course, she is, as Pelle puts it, his sister, so someone around his same age he would consider a sibling. And she has just gotten her pants license. She is allowed to now have sex, and she would like to do that with Christian. So she starts making the moves on Christian in her own very Harga way. She makes a love rune and puts it under his bed, and then she does a little spell that we are actually shown earlier in the movie. So earlier in the movie, there is a character named Ingmar who brought the other two outsiders that I mentioned that I hadn't mentioned earlier, and they see a tapestry and they ask him what it is, and he says it's a little love story. And the tapestry shows a young woman falling in love with a man, and so she takes some of her pubic hairs and bakes them into a pie, and then she takes some of her, forgive me, menstrual fluid, and she puts it into his drink, and he falls in love with her, and they have a baby happily ever after. So she does that. He finds the hair in his pie, which is gross. And then he's taken to the office of one of the village elders, Siv, who sits him down and asks him what he thinks about Maya, which leads to probably my favorite dialogue in this whole movie.
I think I ate one of her pubic hairs.
Sounds probably right.
So as Danny is being celebrated as May Queen and is blessing the fields and whatnot, Christian is off in a barn getting it on with Maya, surrounded by 20 or so of her closest friends and family. This scene is so wild. I cannot show it on YouTube because everybody is naked, but oh my goodness, this scene cracks me up so much because, like, not only are they surrounded by all of these women who are singing and chanting around them, but at one point one of them goes up to Christian, who, by the way, is very drugged up at this point. Like, he's really, really bad. And she just takes his face and starts singing into it, and I literally cannot. I think it's just so funny. Like, oh my goodness, this scene, like, there's so many parts in this movie that just crack me up in like the worst way possible. Like, I know they were trying to be funny, but I also know that they like weren't trying to necessarily be haha funny, but like, it's so freaking funny. You have got to watch it. So yeah, he and Maya do the thing, and then as soon as they're done, she just like starts doing post-coital like baby making things to like make sure that the baby takes root. And Christian, like I said, he's having a trip, and it turns bad like right after he finishes up with Maya. He runs out of the building totally butt naked, goes into another building, finds the very nearly dead body of one of the other visitors, and then he gets like paralyzing sleep powder blown into his face. So, unbeknownst to him, while he was getting it on with Maya, Danny actually broke away from the festivities she was supposed to be involved in because she didn't know where Christian was, and she was pretty sure that there was something sus going on in that barn. So she goes to the barn, people tell her not to go, but nobody really stops her, and she figures out what's happening, which makes her retreat to the sleeping quarters and start bawling her eyes out, and the rest of the women of the community just come to her and hold her and comfort her, which is quite the change to how she was treated the last time she was bawling her eyes out. And finally, at the end, it's announced that there is to be a human sacrifice element to this midsummer, as perhaps y'all have begun to suspect. So the sacrifice is 9 lives total. That is 4 outsiders, 4 Horga, and 1 to be chosen by the May Queen, so Danny. And Danny is given the choice to sacrifice a random Horga or Christian. So, who do you think she chose? Anyway, Christian is stuffed into the hollowed out corpse of a bear, and hey, it's back! The thing that's like a sacred temple is finally being used! The sacrifices are stuffed inside, the building is set on fire, and Danny seems totally cool about it. So that's the inspo for A Little Love Story. All right, so here's my collection all together. I'm actually recording this before I see the entire collection altogether, but I do think right now that just visibly in front of me, that Two Moons is kind of the odd man out here, but I just thought that this polish just encapsulated that first part of the movie so well that I really needed to include it. But other than that, I really love how this collection looks together. And honestly, more than any other collection I've made for this series, this really makes me want to like make an actual collection of my own. I think it'd be so cool to have a midsummer themed nail art polish collection. I think it'd be so cool to see other people's midsummer nail art. And I guess this is an invitation to all of you to do some midsummer nail art. And if you're not interested in actually watching this movie, it is a very rough watch for some people and a very not that rough watch for other people. The first 30 minutes, like I said, the first 30 minutes are absolutely a doozy. But just, look at some Swedish art. This movie is kind of like, your worst boyfriend takes you to an IKEA and then you sacrifice him and you never leave. So if you want to do something in that style without actually watching the movie, I absolutely invite you to do that and tag me in it. I would really love to see it. Anyway, let's talk about my closing thoughts. So like I said at the start of this video, this is my second favorite cult movie set in a remote European village. And that is because the first one is The Wicker Man. I've done a few different nail art looks for The Wicker Man. Wicker Man 1973, not The Wicker Man with Nicolas Cage. The Wicker Man with Nicolas Cage has its charms. It's Nicolas Cage. He punches somebody in a bear costume. Lovely. But the original Wicker Man is so good. And you can see the influences of the original Wicker Man just plastered all over this movie. So the thing about the Wicker Man is at the very end of the movie, somebody is burned alive in a wicker man, in a man made of wicker. And when I was a child, I had heard about that, but I was very averse to watching things like that. That sounded incredibly horrifying to me, so I never actually watched the movie. And then when I got older, I decided I should probably give it a try. And that part of the movie is just such a small part of the movie, and it's not very graphic at all. So I felt like, I'd kind of been misled my entire life thinking that that movie was incredibly brutal when actually it's kind of more fun. And to be honest, a lot of people really love the cult in this movie. I like the cult in this movie. I think as far as horror movie villains go, horror movie cult groups go, it's one of the nicer ones. Like, I'm happy for Danny if she's found her new family, she's found her new place, I guess. I really like Pelle. But I love the cult in Midsommar. In The Wicker Man, I meant to say that I like the cult in The Wicker Man. They're a lot more free and open and seem to have a lot more freedom of thought in their culture. And they do stuff like have sex on gravestones and jump over fire to try to conceive the children of gods. And personally, I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, relating Midsommar to The Wicker Man, I feel like they really just took all of the themes of The Wicker Man and like turned them up to absolutely 11. Like The Wicker Man, I was like pretty surprised at how not brutal it was, but they took every brutal thing about the old Wicker Man and the new Wicker Man, because like the new Wicker Man does try to up the ante, but it's so stupid and funny that like it doesn't really work as horror. It just works as really edgy comedy. But in here, they take like both the elements of both those movies, the actual things that happen in those movies, except for the bees, and they make them real. They make them real, they make them horrifying, they make them just as bad as you would have thought they were going to be if you were like me watching the original Wicker Man. I think that this film is such an incredible tribute to that film and that style of film, and I'm just really happy it was made. This is probably the best horror movie that's been made, I don't know, in the last 10 years or so. I think this is a classic that people are going to be talking about literally for the next century. Just one of the best horror movies ever made, in my opinion, and an incredible movie all around. And I think that the story is so compelling and also in so many ways a little bit uncomfortable. Like, obviously there's obvious ways that it's uncomfortable, but like the character of Christian is such an interesting one. Now, Christian's the boyfriend and he has a lot of issues with avoidance. And I think a lot of us, especially in the day and age of kind of leaving people on red, can kind of like deal with things in an avoidant manner. And Christian is terrible about this. He doesn't break up with his girlfriend. He invites her along to this festival to not argue with her. He keeps extending things out and ignoring things he should be paying attention to. And in the end, he pays the ultimate price for that. But yeah, like Christian sucks towards the beginning of the movie, but I also feel a little tiny bit bad for him just in the situation that he's in, but he just makes avoidant choice after avoidant choice. And this is really, like, I would say for him, a cautionary tale about avoidance. You know, had he not been avoiding his problems for so long, had he treated his girlfriend with respect and maybe canceled his plans to go to Sweden to be with her during her really hard time, maybe none of this would have happened. But he didn't do that, and it did happen. And look how it turned out for him. Also, like I said before, I just think that the use of lighting in this movie and the concept of light and the concept of day and the concept of the day never ending is so incredible. And it fits right into another thing I love about this movie, which is how realistic I feel like the cult indoctrination is. Now, I've never been indoctrinated into a cult, but I'm aware of some cult tactics because I watch that kind of side of YouTube, and they are really going by the book here. So, first, they isolate everybody, they give them a bunch of psychoactive drugs that really just like cloud their vision, make them experience things differently, as one person says, opens them up to influence. They control how much they sleep because, you know, if they don't go to bed, how will they know when it's time to go to bed? They do have their phones on them and they do have clocks on them, but like, you can imagine how weird it would be if there was just like things happening almost 24 hours a day and you're confused and you're not sleeping. And so you're just kind of trying to take everybody's goodwill at face value in this community. Also, at one point, Mark, the really rude one, mentions that everything that they eat is like kind of gross and it's like trying to gross them out, the food that they're serving them. And I actually think that that is true. All their meals are at these big long tables, and the food in front of them, it's always a really small amount of food. And there's often like other plates, but they close up on like flies buzzing into it. The food never looks appetizing. And so that's another thing that cults will use to kind of indoctrinate you. They'll use lack of sleep, they'll use lack of food, they'll use psychoactive drugs, they'll use, you know, you experiencing really emotionally intense things and them, you know, either comforting you or acting like it's normal. So this is all just by the book indoctrination. You can just see it just like beat for beat, moment for moment in this film. And I thought it was so cool how they did that. And I thought it was really interesting how they really like try to indoctrinate you, the viewer, into this cult. Like I said, I don't like this cult as much as a lot of people do. I think a lot of people are like, yes, I am on their side. No, I am still in the Summer Isles with Lord Summer Isle, Christopher Lee, having a good time jumping over fire, having sex in the graveyard. But I do think this cult's really good, and I do think Ari Aster, you created a masterpiece. So thank you so much for making this for us to enjoy. What an incredible film. All right, well, that is it for today. Thank you all so much for watching today. It's been a while since I put out a video. I'm trying to kind of like get my life a little bit more slow paced, a pace that I can keep up with, and still make fun stuff for everybody to watch. And I'm still streaming on Twitch quite a bit. And also, if you don't know, we do watch a lot of these movies that I cover in this series in my Discord, and we watch other films as well. In fact, when this comes out, we will have watched it yesterday. And if you are 18 plus and queer friendly, I would love to see you in my Discord, hanging out with us, catching some flicks, talking about nail polish, having a good time. Anyway, if you had a really good time today, my name was Stephanie. You can catch me on Instagram, Twitch, YouTube. I have a podcast called Two Lacquered Ladies with my friend Danny Shout. And you can find it wherever podcasts are available, even here on YouTube. And if you didn't have a good time, well, then my name was Nick. Anyway, have a really wonderful day, everybody. Be excellent to yourselves, be excellent to each other, and I will catch you on the flip side. Bye-bye.